PlayStation 2 gets Shumi Goomy Goobadoo Persona 3 Fez. And
Shumi Goomy Goobadoo.
yeah. They're going to put fake words on the title of boxes. I can say whatever I want when those words come around.
For Atlas is going to call it. It's going to be Shumi Doomy.
And PSP gets nothing, of course.
Man, PSP is, what happened this week?
I don't know. You know, it's not that great of a week for it.
What was
the
that?
hell was that?
Whoa.
Did you hear something? It's just a box.
Actually, I think it's more than a box. I think it's David Hayter. How are you doing today?
Excellent, thank you. Very, very well.
Very good. Let's get right into our reader questions here. So our first question comes from our reader named Itchy Frosty Balls, who wants to know how you became the voice actor for Snake, and did you simply fall into it, or did you contact Konami and pitch for the role, or how did that come about?
No, well, good question, Itchy Balls. I had done a cameo on Captain Planet in 1993.
Awesome.
That's how I got started, too.
Was cast. I'm sorry?
That's how I got started, too.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first voiceover job, and it was cast by Chris Zimmerman. And 5 years later, Chris was the voice director for the English version of Metal Gear Solid. And just out of nowhere, I hadn't even spoken to her in 5 years. She called me in to audition for it. I went to this little house in Hollywood where they had tacked up all the artwork for Metal Gear. I took a look at Snake and sort of came up with a voice for it and auditioned, and then they called me and said, you've got the part. So I didn't lobby for it. I didn't know anything about it, really. And it wasn't until we started getting into it that they started to make it clear to me that this was going to be a big, significant game.
That's awesome.
Right on. Well, considering that you've been doing the voice of Snake for a decade, what's it like to basically be at the end of the franchise? I mean, after a decade's worth of work.
Well, it's certainly bittersweet. I had my suspicions when we did the first one that it was going to make quite an impact, and I thought it would be a big game, especially given the fact that we were sort of at the advent of PlayStation 1. The home gaming was really kicking in at that point, and then it's just been an amazing run. The fan response is incredible, and my it's become very schizophrenic between me and Snake. I really start to look at him as a real person and as a real part of my personality. So in one way, it's tough to let him go, but in another way, he was a clone from the beginning, and I can't hang on too tight.
That's true. Although, considering that there seem to be a lot of other offshoot games, kind of like Metal Gear Acid or even the digital graphic novels, would it be possible that we'd see you possibly recreating Snake in some other game down the line, if they come up with one?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they ask me to do it, I'll certainly do it. This is probably the funnest job in show business as far as all the jobs I've had anyway. And I do it if they ask me, but I have no idea if they're planning that or not.
Are you in talk to them about perhaps doing other franchises, or are you still? How much are you pursuing more gaming work?
Not at all. I don't act at all anymore, really, except for Snake. And people always ask me, well, are you in talks with Konami about this or that? I'm not in talks with anyone, really. Even on something big like Metal Gear 4, they just call me a couple months beforehand and say, okay, we're doing Metal Gear 4. Are you interested? And we work it out. So look, if they came up with something that they wanted me to do, I would always consider it and consider it seriously, because I like those guys a lot, but I'm not chasing down any acting work. Wow,
that's kind of surprising, because he was in Guyver. I mean,
I was, yeah, that's true, yeah. I started out as an actor, and
right.
I did that for 10 years, and it's a great job to have. It's not a great job to chase after, and now that I'm a relatively successful screenwriter, I don't need to audition for jobs anymore, and so I don't pursue it. I'm one of those guys that if a filmmaker knows me from past jobs and they want to just cast me in a movie, I'll certainly do anything. I'm very much like a prostitute in that manner.
Since you,
but I don't chase it down. I'm not in the mood for all the bullshit that occurs.
Since you just mentioned screenplay stuff, a couple of our readers, Ian Mackin in particular, wants to know what's up with the Watchmen script and whether it's available online, and how that went.
Well, actually, I just found out on Friday that I got screenplay credit on Watchmen. Myself and Alex C.
Nice.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It really meant a huge amount to me. I worked on it for 7 years, and
wow.
And it was a big, hairy thing. So, and I think the movie's going to be great. So I'm really proud to be a part of that. And I'm sorry, what was the specifics of the question that you wanted to know?
Is
it available online?
Yeah.
No. It's kept highly confidential. You know, anybody who wants to read it has to sign non-disclosure agreements and so on and so forth. But
couldn't you put the non-disclosure agreement online so I could sign it there and then look at it?
I think that he's probably...
I guess you could do that.
I think he was probably asking because I know that earlier a lot of people weren't sure whether or not you would get credit for your screenwriting, especially for Watchmen, because a lot of people considered it to be basically the closest comic book adaptation ever written. And so a lot of people were worried whether or not you'd get credit for it or not.
Yeah, well, and a lot of those people included me. People don't understand that writing credits on a movie it's a difficult, ugly process deciding those credits, and it's not always indicative of who actually worked on the movie. So I could have just as easily gotten screwed out of credit, but I was very well supported by the producers who understood that I kind of took it out of this 17-year death that it was in and brought it back, and that it really was my efforts at turning it into a screenplay that sort of got it to the stage that Zach picked it up from. And so it was very cool of them to keep that in mind when they submitted the credits. And then and we had a bit of a credit arbitration, and the Writers Guild arbiters read my material and felt that it was still significantly my screenplay. And so while the script is not posted online, I think you can take from my credit the fact that it is still very close to the original material. That was very important to me and to Zack Snyder, that it really stay close to what the book is, because the book is just absolutely brilliant. Why mess with it?
Yeah,
definitely.
Along these sort of lines, but going back to the Metal Gear franchise, Knilink, whatever that name is wondering how much freedom that you have on your end when you're doing voice work over the script. Are you allowed to freeform in any fashion, or do you have to stick specifically by the lines that are written?
Well, excellent question. We can change things in a very minor way. The problem is a lot of times, it has to do with the programming of the Japanese game and the timing of the scenes in Japanese, and it also has to do with the specifics of what Mr. Kojima wants to get across. And so sometimes the problem lies in the translation from Japanese to English, and I speak a little Japanese, and so I'm able to sort of say, well, I think what he means is this, and sort of clarify the translation. And occasionally I'll change a sentence or something just to make it flow better or be more interesting. But every time I do that, I make sure that it's okay with the producers, and for the most part, I stick to the script. So it's not like, they hire me as an actor, not a writer. So I which would be considerably more expensive. And so I try to keep it pretty much within the confines of what they're trying to put across.
Gomez wants to know along the same lines if there were anything that were drastically changed at any point in the franchise due to translation, being the meanings of character names or anything along those lines.
No, absolutely not. That's part of the thing that remains very strictly translated all the way through. If they're trying to get a point across or a subtle metaphor across with somebody's name, well, we leave it alone. And there's themes, there's subtle things that run all the way through. That I don't always understand. I mean, in hopefully this doesn't violate anything, but when I did Metal Gear 4, they said, well, sense is a very big theme in Metal Gear 4 for Mr. Kojima. And I said, well, that's interesting because that sentence doesn't make any. So there'd be times when they'd say sense, that where it didn't fit, and then I'd say, well, can we change that? And they'd say, well, no, we can't because it's Mr. Kojima's theme. And I'd say, oh, okay, well then I'll just try to make it work. So no, anything that comes from Mr. Kojima, even if it's difficult to translate, we try to keep it, dead on to what he intended.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And then just regarding the time of how long it takes you to do this sort of thing, Jeff Ramsaroop was wondering how long it took you to do the dialogue for MGS4, but can you also compare that to the previous 3 games?
Yes. Metal Gear 1, I think, took 2 weeks. Metal Gear 2 probably took about 3 weeks. Metal Gear 3 took about a month. And Metal Gear 4 took us from February to October of this year.
Wow! Oh my God!
Not working constantly, but I mean, just going back and back and back and back. It was. I mean, the script had to be 800 to 1,000 pages long.
I can believe it, especially because I've already played it. But yeah. I actually had a follow-up on that, which is considering the voiceover sessions. Are they like your traditional voiceover session where you walk into the room and you do your dialogue by itself, or is it kind of a little bit more like a theatrical presentation where all the voice actors are in one room, they read through the script and all those changes, and then kind of get a sense of what's going on with the plot and the story before they begin?
Well, it's sort of in between those two. What I I've gotten more demanding as I've gotten more ensconced into this job, and I did request. I always like to do the scenes with the actors I'm acting with because I think it's far better for the performance. And I also, on Metal Gear 3, we just recorded to, I think, just the timing of the sentences, so we couldn't see the characters' bodies, and occasionally, Snake is, freaking out, his body is acting wildly, and my voice is just like, well, what do you want to do? And it just doesn't fit, and so I said, look, I really want to see the actors this time, or I want to see the cutscenes as we're doing it, because it'll be far better for the performance. So they said, okay, we'll make that work. Well, they hadn't finished the Japanese game, so what we recorded to were the motion capture actors in their ping pong ball suits, sort of running around the soundstage in Japan, and it was hilarious. I mean, you had the guy playing the monkey, who they eventually shrunk down, but that's a real guy running around in a suit pretending to be a monkey, and so we would record to that. And to answer your question, the other part of your question, we don't really prepare it. I mean, they give you the script in advance, and you can go over it and make notes. But once we get in, we sort of just do it on the fly. But we do it, with each other. You have, I have Otacon there, and we can sort of riff off of each other, and it makes it a much fuller, much more entertaining performance, I think.